This episode is brought to you by Sterling Soap Company. How often do you think about your soap? Well, if you answered, not much, maybe you should. You see, a lot of what passes for soap in stores is technically not soap, according to the FDA's definition. It's full of lab-created chemicals and detergents because, well, it's cheaper to make. Now, what if you could buy natural soap made from natural ingredients like tallow, palm oil, coconut oil, and scented with essential oils, and for just a little more than you'd pay for grocery store soap? Sterling Soap is 100% natural, and with a wide variety of bath soaps, shave soaps, beard balm, lotions, and cologne, there's a product and a scent for just about everybody. Check them out for yourself at sterlingsoap.com. That's STIRLING soap.com. Are you a hockey fan? Then you'll love Eric Zweig's new book, Hockey Hall of Fame True Stories 2. It's a treasure trove of untold tales, bizarre incidents, and captivating trivia that will leave even the most devoted puckhead astounded. The intense rivalries, epic showdowns, and historic clashes that shaped the NHL's early years, it's all in there. Zweig uncovers the true stories that helped shape the sport, ensuring that you will never look at hockey the same way again. Check out Hockey Hall of Fame True Stories 2 on Amazon or wherever fine books are sold. Back for another edition of This Day in Sports History, a proud member of the Sports History Network. Check out sportshistorynetwork.com for more information and to find more podcasts. This is your host, Steve White, and it's time to jump into the old sports time continuum and find out what happened on this day, beginning in 1988, with a trade that shook up the hockey landscape. When the trade sending Wayne Gretzky from the Edmonton Oilers to the Los Angeles Kings was announced on this day, it sent shockwaves that continued to ripple for many years after. This was quite a shock in the hockey world, and especially in Canada, where hockey is a religion. Gretzky was a national hero and hockey royalty. In his 9 years with the Edmonton Oilers, he'd led the team to 4 Stanley Cup titles. He'd led the league in scoring 5 times, led the league in assists every year he was there, and he scored more points than anybody else in the league in 8 of those 9 years. And the great one was being traded to Los Angeles? A team that had just 5 winning seasons in their 21-year existence, a team on the west coast of the United States. The only ice there can be found in their cocktails served at those Hollywood red carpet parties. They don't know hockey. The great one is going there? Indeed he was. So the deal that was finalized and announced on this day was this. Edmonton sent Gretzky, Marty McSorley, and Mike Krushelnyski to L.A. in exchange for Jimmy Carson, Martin Jelena, the first-round draft picks in the 89, 91, and 93 drafts, along with $15 million. And the bigger shocker may have been that Gretzky himself initiated the trade talk. He had recently married actress Janet Jones, an American from California, and of course the rumor was that she pressured him into asking for a move back to California and was the real catalyst to this deal. He kind of confirmed that when he made the statement that he'd requested the trade for the benefit of his family, his wife, and our expected child in the new year. So, how did the trade benefit each team? Well, for Los Angeles, the effect was immediate. A team that had finished in 4th place in the Smythe in 87 improved by 12 games in 88 for a 2nd place finish in the division. And then, as an extra kick in the gut to Oilers fans, the Kings beat Edmonton in the first round of the playoffs in 7 games in 88. The Oilers got their revenge the following year when they beat the Kings in the playoffs and won their first cup without Gretzky. But the ripples of this trade were constant for several more years. Gretzky's move to L.A. helped hockey grow in the States. Sure, the Kings had been around since the early 1970s, but nobody really cared about the Kings in L.A. Gretzky made people care. The effect on ticket sales for Kings games after the trade was dramatic, and it showed a lot of influential people around the country that hockey could thrive in a non-traditional market. Even though the World Hockey Association had had some success with teams in the Sun Belt, people in the NHL did not buy it until Gretzky arrived on the West Coast. So it is a fair question to ponder. would teams like the Florida Panthers, the Tampa Bay Lightning, Dallas Stars, Phoenix Coyotes, or even the Carolina Hurricanes even exist today if it had not been for the trade that happened on this day that sent Gretzky to the LA Kings? On this day in 2012, Usain Bolt won the 200-meter sprint at the Olympics, becoming the first Olympian to win both the 100 and the 200 in back-to-back Olympics. American Carl Lewis is the only other man to have accomplished that feat in a single Olympic Games when he did it back in 1984. Noah Lyles attempted to join that list yesterday, but came up a little bit short in the 200. But back to Bolt. And if you remember back to the July 23rd edition of This Dish, my non-sports fun fact from that day was about nominative determinism. And it's the theory that your name puts you on a particular life path. And with a name like Bolt, it makes perfect sense that he wound up as a sprinter. But he wasn't just a regular speedster. He was one of the all-time greats. On this night, Bolt lined up in lane 7 with his electric personality on full display before he settled into the starting blocks. He'd set the Olympic record 4 years earlier in Beijing and the world record in '09, but running in this race against him was his countryman Johan Blake, who had the fastest 200 of the year up to this point. Did he have anything for his teammate? Bolt ran the turn well and came into the home 100 with just a small lead over Blake, but with his long strides, Bolt kept him at arm's length. Bolt even pulled off the accelerator in the final 25, coasting over the finish line with his index finger extended over his lips. Bolt had done it once again in 19.32 seconds. Blake had the distinction of having the fastest non-winning 200-meter time with his 19.44 second run. Speaking of Olympic legends, on this day in 1936, it was Jesse Owens rounding out his Olympic performance with another gold medal. This was the 4x100-meter relay, but Owens was not actually scheduled to run this originally. But the morning of the race, two Jewish members of the U.S. relay team, Sam Stoller and Marty Glickman, were scratched, and Owens and Ralph Metcalf inserted. There was a rumor that the change was requested by U.S. Olympic Chairman Avery Brundage as a way to not humiliate Hitler with Jewish runners in the winning team, but that doesn't really hold water, right? Because considering that the two Jewish runners were replaced with two black runners, and as I mentioned a few days ago, Hitler and his Nazi contingent refused to acknowledge any of the black athletes as human beings, instead calling them auxiliaries during the length of the Olympic Games. Owens had already set a world record in the 100-meter, an Olympic record in the 200 and the long jump, and was now ready to lead off the relay. When the gun sounded, Owens skated to an early lead, handed the baton to Metcalf, Foy Draper ran the third leg, and when Frankie Wyckoff crossed the line as the anchor, the U.S. team had set another world record of 39.8 seconds. Italy finished second, and the Germans were a distant third, nearly a second and a half behind the Americans. Owens was riding a high after winning 4 gold medals at the Olympics, but his life was only days away from taking a severe turn for the worse, as homegrown racism reared its ugly head and turned Owens' life upside down. I'll have more on that in just a few days. And on this day in 1976, Cal Hubbard was elected to the Baseball Hall of Fame. Now, if you're a guy in your mid-50s like me, then there's a good chance you do not know the name Cal Hubbard. But that's why this show exists, right? So we can spotlight athletes that you may not know, but should, or at least know a little bit. Hubbard was inducted on this day as an umpire. He started umpiring in 1928 when he was playing professional football, and I'll get to that in just a minute. He was called up to the majors in 1936, and he spent the next 15 years umpiring Major League Baseball games. His big legacy from his umpiring days, that was written into the rules in 1952 and is still around today, is the idea that an umpire has a set role each game. Before, the umpires would rotate. They'd call balls and strikes for a few innings, then they'd go down the first base line for a few more, and so on, and keep rotating around. Now, as I alluded to earlier, Hubbard played football in the early days of the NFL. He started with the New York Giants in 1927. He was traded to the Green Bay Packers in '28 after he demanded it, or he was going to retire from the game. He didn't seem to be a fan of the Big Apple, and after playing a game in Green Bay, decided that was the place for him. He played there until 1933 before stepping away from the game for a year, only to return to play a couple of more seasons. He was elected to the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 1969, named that year as the greatest tackle to ever play the game. Now, he's the only person to be elected to both the Pro Football and Pro Baseball Halls of Fame. And that's why you should know the name, Cal Hubbard. Time now for today's non-sports Did You Know? The kiwi fruit was originally grown in China and known as the Chinese gooseberry until 1959. That's all I've got for you today, and yesterday I closed out by talking about a new podcast platform I found called Good Pods, and I mentioned that this podcast was 27th in the sports podcast category. Well, when I checked again yesterday, this dish was up to 16th. So let's see if we can get this podcast into the top 10, or maybe even number 1 in the sports podcast category. Just download the Good Pods app, sign up, and add This Day in Sports History as one of your favorites. Then start listening, give the episode 5 stars, and sit back and watch it climb to the top. All your other favorite podcasts are there as well, so check out Good Pods in the App Store or Google Play Store. All right, enough of that. Have a great day, and no matter where you listen, I will be back tomorrow with another edition of This Day in Sports History. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.
Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, a.k.a. the Football History Dude, and I hope that you enjoyed this recent episode presented by the Sports History Network and were able to learn some good old-fashioned sports history knowledge nuggets. I started the Sports History Network back in 2020 with the mission to help podcasters find a community of like-minded sports history nerds, as well as helping aspiring podcasters to start their own shows. We have a little bit over 30 shows on the network right now covering all sorts of sports history, but as far as I'm concerned, we're just at the toothpick in the ocean moment, that can't even figure it out because there's so much more coming. We wanted to create the ultimate headquarters for sports yesteryear, starting with Podcast Network and our website, but we're going to continue to move into other mediums as well. And here's the cool part, because we want you to be part of our team. So if you're interested in starting your own podcast, or maybe being a guest on one of our shows, or who knows, maybe even writing an article for us over on the website. Seriously, all you got to do is reach out to us on the contact page over at sportshistorynetwork.com. You can be as technologically savvy as a Neanderthal tapping on a stone trying to figure out this whole hieroglyphics thing back in the day. Again, it doesn't matter, because even if you don't understand the whole podcast space, we have a production team that can pretty much help you out with doing everything. All you got to do, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com, head to the contact page, fill it out. That message goes right to me, and I'll reach out to you as soon as I can. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through.